Hey everybody, in this video we're going to streamline an invoice approval process using Microsoft 365. Our solution consists of SharePoint, which we'll use to store our invoice documents. We'll utilize SharePoint content types to ensure our data is nice and standardized. And for the workflow, we'll use a Power Automate flow and the out-of-the-box Microsoft approval actions within that. As a bonus, I'll show you how to use JSON formatting in a SharePoint list or library view just to enhance that user experience a little bit. So let's get started. To get started, we first need a SharePoint site. So I've gone away and created a blank finance team site just off SharePoint. The next bit that I'd like to do is start creating the data store of where I'm going to store the invoices and where people can go to view the invoices. What I like to do is create a content type rather than use the metadata of a default document library. So what I'll do is head into the site content types by heading the settings, site information, and then going into the site settings, and then open up site content types. Now, site content types are only for the actual specific SharePoint site. You can do this on your tenant level or your environment level in the content type hub. That is probably recommended depending if it's going to be sort of organizational wide information. For the purpose of the demo, we're just going to set something up in the finance content type gallery. So first thing I want to do is create a content type, and I'll call this an invoice. We can use an existing category or create a new category. What I'll do is I'll use an existing category and just list it under the document content types. And then parent category, document content types, and its parent content type is a document. So what that'll do is just use the relevant side columns that a document uses, which is the default stuff that's in a document library anyway. If I go ahead and create that, that'll go away and create the content type for us. So now I want to add the relevant fields or the columns that I want to know about the invoice. So, things that you would have on a finance system or an invoice system. To make it really basic, I'm just going to have the department, who the approver is, when it was approved, the status of that invoice, and the outcome reason. So to do that, we click on the Add Site column, create new site column, and then we go ahead and create all the different site columns. Okay, so there's our content type with all the columns created. So we have a department or function that's using the managed metadata from our term store. So our organization has a column called department that we can, or has a term called department that we can take those departments from. We've got the approver, which is going to be a person or group that we select. We've got the approved on, which will be a date and time. Outcome reason is going to be some text, and the approval status, which is a list of choices, and those choices are uploaded, pending approval, approved, or rejected. Okay, now we've got our content type created, we're going to go ahead and create a library to store our invoices. Quite easy on SharePoint, we just hit the new button and then select document library here. We get a load of options. We can choose invoices, learning, media library. This will be sort of a template that Microsoft have created, but I'm going to use a blank library because I want to use the content type that I've created earlier. Give it a name, maybe a description, and you can choose to show it in the site nav or not. Okay, now we've got our library created. What we need to do now is make sure that the content type we created is attached or on this library, so that when we're uploading files, it's always going to have that metadata that we wanted to capture about the invoice. So for this, we're going to head into the library settings and go more library settings. And then what we can do is head into advanced settings here. And what we want to do is allow management of content types here. And that will allow us to have content types on the invoices. We can do it directly from the library because this is a little bit of a, not a new feature, but a ability to do so. If we then hit OK down here, we can head to our document library, and where we've got add column, if we select that, we can scroll down to the bottom and say add a content type. I hit next there. We should then be able to choose an invoice and hit apply. And that's where information is really powerful in SharePoint, is as long as we've got the content type either on the site level or in our tenant level, organizations can then create different pieces of metadata that we want to tag to different content, whether it be a page, whether it be a video, whether it be any sort of file. And we can disseminate that across all SharePoint sites in our environment, and then later on use powerful tools like the PMP search stuff to bring them all into one single place. So we've added that content type to the library. Now what I want to do is make sure that only the invoice content type is available in this document library. I don't want a document to be in there because that's not going to have the metadata that I want to use. So if I select document, I can go ahead and delete this content type from the library, which has done it. And now I've only got invoices in this library. So when I start uploading files in here, they will always be that invoice content type. Now what I'd like to do is set the columns up on the view. So I can just hit add column there, show or hide columns, and then start to select the ones that I've created earlier on. I'll do content type so we can make sure that that is following our invoices, and then hit apply. And then what I'll do is just sort of move things around a little bit. Content type over there, so we know there's the file name. Move the modified by to the end. Status next to the file name. Department, approver, outcome reason. Great. And then that will be the view that we use when we start testing things out. Next, we want to create a Power Automate flow so that for any file that we upload here, we can essentially select that file and ask whoever is set in our approver column to approve the file. So there's a couple of ways we can do so. We can do it within the toolbar on the library here by selecting Integrate, Power Automate, Create Flow, and then selecting a template to edit. What I like to do is kind of start from a blank canvas. So head to make.powerautomate.com and then select the Create button and select the Instant Cloud Flow. We can then give our flow a name. So I will call this Invoice Approvals. And then choose the trigger for a selected file and hit create. And that will go away and start to create our first flow. First, we need to select the site address and the library name for our trigger. So we'll go ahead and select the finance site and the invoices library. Now what the for a selected file does is gives out sort of basic properties for the file. But because we want all the file properties, such as the approver and the status, etc., we're going to add an action that's actually going to get the file properties. So get file properties, and that is from the finance site and the invoices library. Now the ID, this is the file that we want to get the properties for, which is going to be from the for a selected file. So what we can do is use the dynamic data from here and select the ID parameter from the for a selected file. That will then give us all the properties that we want from that file. We then can start to create the approval. So what Microsoft has is a approval action. We can then go ahead and select start and wait for an approval and choose the approval type. So the approval type is one of 5 options. We've got the everyone has to approve, so everybody in the list of approvers has to approve before that whole approval is finished, or only one person needs to respond for that approval to be finished. And then we've got custom responses, wait for all or wait for one, and then we've also got the sequential approval. So everybody in order has to approve. I'll just go ahead and select the first to respond, approve, reject, and then we can start to fill in the rest of the details for the start and wait for an approval action. So the title, I'll say invoice is, or invoice requires your approval. Assigned to, so what we want to do is get the approver details from the actual file. So we hit the switch to advanced mode here, and then just grab the dynamic properties for a file property here. So you can see more, and then approver email is the one that we want. Any details we can put inside the approval request. So here we can say the invoice attached requires your approval, and the item link here we can use the link to this item, and we can give it a description. So maybe we use the file name here, file name extension, and then we can say enable notifications or enable reassignment, and that is how we're going to start and wait for the approval. We then want the approval to update our actual file properties or our metadata against that invoice. So once that has actually initiated, or before that's actually initiated, we should probably do this, is update the file properties. So go ahead and select the finance and invoices. We choose the dynamic content for selected file, and what we want to update is the approval status value, to say pending approval. So once it gets uploaded, it'll first be in sort of the uploaded status. And then once we've kicked this flow off, it'll then say pending approval and send the approval out, just so we know at what stage all the invoices are. Now that that update's happened and the approval's been sent, we can then essentially wait for their approval, and once someone has clicked accept or reject, we are going to update the file properties. So now what I'd like to do is test the flow, just to see what it's outputting when I throw the approval out, but also once I've approved or rejected it, I want to see what the output of that is so that I can choose what branch or create branches for whether it's approved or rejected. So first thing, you just got to save your flow. Once it's saved, we can head to our invoice document library. You can see I've added a couple of invoices here. Select the invoice we want to test it against. Go ahead, hit the 3 dots, automate, and then invoice approvals. If we do this the first time, it'll ask us to sign into a couple of things. Other than that, it should just say run flow. There we go. Go ahead and hit run flow, and then we can see the flow has started. I can then go back to the flow page on Power Automate, and you can see there's one running. If I select that, we can see you go through all the actions, and then it's going to start and wait for an approval. So if I refresh that, hopefully, there we go, our pending approval is there. I can then open up Outlook. And we can see the approval has come through in the form of an email. So what I'll do is I'll quickly approve that and put some comments in and hit submit. I can then head back to my flow and I can see the action there is completed. And this is where I'll see what the outputs are. So we can see that there's comments and we can also see what the outcome is. And that is kind of what we want. Okay, so I know that the outcome is now going to be approve, and I'm going to assume that if it is rejected, it's going to be reject. So I can then go ahead and add to my flow and create that sort of branch that I want to do. So what I'll do is I'll actually store that outcome in a compose action by selecting the dynamic there, and then the outcome of approval. So I'll go ahead and rename this to outcome. I then want to actually put a condition in so that I can update the file properties and let the person who's created or uploaded the file or requested the approval know that it's either been approved or rejected. So if I go ahead and add an action, choose control and select a condition, I can select what I want to actually put the condition against. So what I want to do is say the outcome of approval is approve. If that is true, I'm going to update the file properties. And I can go ahead, update file status to approved. I'll go ahead and select the site and the library. And the file ID is going to be the first one that we have here. And the only ones that we actually want to show is when it was approved on, the status, and the outcome reason. So the approval status will then become approved. Approved on will be an expression. So what we want to do is select the FX icon here, and we can just say UTC now. That gives us the time and date that it was actually done. Our outcome reason, instead of the expression, what we want to do is get the comments of the approval. So responses, comments. There we go. So that will put it into a for each because it assumes that there's going to be more than one response. We don't need to do that, or don't really need to worry about that, should I say, because there's always only going to be one outcome for that approval. And that will update that to there. And then what we can also do is then send a email or a Teams message to the creator, so or the person who's requested. What I'll do is send an email, select connection, or just add a new one. And then I can go ahead and switch to advanced mode and choose so this can be the person who's created the file, and we can say invoice approved. Hi, this is to inform you that, let's say, the approver from here has approved the invoice, and we can get the invoice name from here. File name with extension. Put that in there, and then that should be that. So we'll go ahead and save that, and then we can run a test once that's been saved. So that's now saved. I'll head back to our document library, select an invoice to test, and go ahead, automate invoice approvals. We'll sign in and then run the flow. I head back to our flow. You can see that it's running. So head into my emails. We should see an email pop up fairly soon. There's our email. I'll go ahead and approve this and say first invoice approved. Hit submit. Just go watch what the flow does. You can see it goes through everything. And then, hi, informed, I've improved the invoice. Thanks. If I then go back to the document library, I can see that invoice has been approved by myself and approved today, and the reason is there. So that's a pretty cool way of getting approvals into a document library. Now what I want to do is build the reject side of things. So if I go ahead and go back to our flow and hit edit, what the flow is going to assume, or how I'm building it, is that the outcome, if it's not approved, it's always going to be reject. So here I can essentially just copy the same methods that I've used in the true branch. So here I'll select the site address, do finance, invoices, and instead of naming that update file properties, I'll update file status to rejected. Select the ID, which will be that one, and then I want to start selecting approval status and approved on. So the approved on could probably be called outcome on rather than the approved on. We want rejected here, and then again we'll use the expression for UTC now, and then the outcome reason again will be our response comments, and that should stick that in a for each again, which is okay. And then we can put in the send email again, and remember to switch to advanced mode. Go ahead and choose the approver, or the person who created it by, should I say, not the person who created it, created by email, and we'll say invoice rejected. We'll say, hey, this is to inform you that. Go ahead and choose the approver. has rejected the invoice. Choose the file name from our get file properties, and then we can say comments and go ahead and get the comments for it too if we wanted. So it's comments, that'll stick that in a for each also, and then that should be that. So we'll go ahead and hit save. Great, now that that's saved, we can go ahead and test it with the other invoice that I've got here. So I can go ahead and select that, hit the three dots, automate, invoice approvals, run the flow. I'll go back, see that it's running, and then have a look in my emails. There we go, another one from Power Automate. I can see the invoice there. I'll go ahead and hit reject and say rejection comments. Submit that. And then goes ahead and informs me that I've rejected it. And there's our comments. I go back to our document library and just hit refresh. You can see rejected, and our rejected comments go there. So there we go. We've got invoices able to be uploaded into a library, and we can go ahead and select each of those invoices and get a approval from a relevant person, whoever we stick in that column. Now what I'd like to do is maybe enhance this experience for whoever's coming in and uploading invoices and choosing fields, because I find SharePoint list views or library views to be a little bit not clunky but very clicky when we are updating these sort of properties like the approver, the function, or the department, or the approval status. So what we'd have to do out of the box is hit the three dots, choose details, and then click edit all there, and then I can go ahead and edit who the approver is. Otherwise, what else I can do is hit the three dots and select more, and then hit properties, and then hit edit that, and then go and change the details there. What I'd really like to have is a button in here that as soon as I click it, opens up our edit details pane. So I looked quite a bit for something that will do that, and I came across this chap, Michael Mendez. He has actually sorted out using JSON list formatting and having a custom row action that will open up that edit properties pane. So I'll put this in the description so you can go ahead and read it. But to set it up is quite simple. If we go back into the library, we can just go ahead and add a single line of text column, and I'll call this edit. Add to all content types, and then go ahead and hit edit details. Hit save. That goes over there. I'll stick it over there just so we can see everything. I'm going to hide our content type column. And then here, I'm going to go edit details and format the column. And what you want to do is go into advanced mode and then take the JSON formatting that Mikhail has done for us and actually paste it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy. If I hit preview, you can see the edit button hits there. I'm going to save that. And now when I click edit, I can see the properties there. And I just think that's a much better experience than the 3 or 4 clicks that you have to get to open up the properties of a library. So Microsoft, if you're listening, just put this in as default, please. What will also be quite nice is if we had a button sort of near the actual file that we can just automatically push the or start the flow rather than selecting it and then clicking automate and then clicking the flow. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing with some JSON formatting. I'll go ahead and add a column. We'll just call it a text column. And we'll hit submit flow. Once that's saved, I'll throw that next to there. And then we're going to format the column, advanced mode, and I've got some code already or some JSON already. So I'm going to paste that there. And the only thing that we need to show here is actually the flow GUID, which we can get from our flow. And we can see that it's actually in our URL at the top here. After the slash, after flows, we can copy this and paste that inside there. We then hit preview. You can see that our submit for approval comes there. I'll hit save there. Make that a little bit bigger so we can see refresh. And that's a pretty nice, neat looking invoice approval solution at the moment. So I'll just test the submit for approval button. We can see that automatically selects the flow or selects the file and starts our flow. So there we have it, a finance invoice approval process, nicely streamlined, no more sending multiple emails, just uploading documents, pushing a button. Stay tuned for more real life scenarios on my new YouTube channel, Everyday 365. And if you've got any ideas or scenarios that you'd like to see, feel free to comment. Thanks for watching.